Hey, good morning. This is the second day of MERI. As usual, MERI is becoming the buzz of town every year, and this year is no exception. Clearly, yesterday we had a wonderful day full of events and full of excellent discussion, and hopefully today will be very much similar, if not better, as I have here a very distinguished panel of diplomats serving in Iraq and Erbil. And they will be talking about stability in Iraq. Obviously, stability is a key word when we really talk about Iraq and what it means for the Iraqi themselves, for the region, and for the wider world. I like to quote what the Secretary General of the United Nations said recently. Stability of Iraq, the democratic nature of Iraq, the non-sectarian nature of Iraq, I think, fundamental contribution to the whole region and for peace and security globally. I believe all the international community should be fully engaged in supporting Iraq in the process that is now taking place. So clearly the international contribution to stability of Iraq is a key word here, and they have done excellent in many ways, especially when it comes to the coalition that helped Iraqis to get rid of ISIS, be it here in Kurdistan region or in wider Iraq. They have been key ally to defeating ISIS. And stability doesn't really mean security alone. It means stability for economy, stability for social engagement, and so on. So I'd like to hear from the panel what they think stability means for Iraq and what their countries would do here in Iraq to help the Iraqis and to help the stability of Iraq and the process of reconstruction and rebuilding the nation. Stuart will be unfortunately leaving us early as he has some emergency issues at 10 o'clock, so I'd like you to start first.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Farhad. Can everyone hear me? And can everyone understand my very thick Scottish accent? I hope that goes down well in this part of the country anyway. First of all, apologies from our ambassador and deputy ambassador in Baghdad. They couldn't make it for various reasons, so I've been asked to fill in. So I hope I can give you an overview of our United Kingdom's views on the issue set by Farhad, and I hope we can answer your questions as well. As our Prime Minister Theresa May said when she came to Baghdad last year, the UK is committed to a strong and enduring partnership with Iraq to ensure its unity, stability and prosperity. We've invested a lot in Iraq in the last generation, so we have an interest in that stability. We believe that new administrations in Baghdad and in Erbil, and following the territorial defeat of Daesh, mean that we have a real opportunity to deliver on that stability and security and to win the peace, as is the phrase that I'm sure we hear more often than not. So we're clear that the international community, all of us together as nations and as international organisations, have a vital role in helping the next Iraq and Kurdistan regional governments to deliver for their electorates. We understand Iraq's need to balance its relationships with its neighbours and with other regional and global powers, and we strongly believe that Iraq should not have to make the choice of good relationships with one country over another. Diplomacy should never be a zero-sum game, I'm sure, or I hope many of us agree. So our approach, the UK's approach in Iraq, is underpinned by the principle that our engagement is based on full recognition of Iraq's sovereignty and Iraq's independence. That means we'll support Iraq where our partners here welcome our support, whether that's the government in Baghdad or the government here in KRI. And we're clear that this support is available, as our Prime Minister said, for the long term. It's enduring. So with that in mind, the UK has been talking to partners here about the issues that arose during the election campaigns, which came through in the debates, which we heard from the electorates, which we heard from the politicians. And we've identified 5 broad priorities, which we believe the international community can work with the next governments in Baghdad and Erbil. So the first of these, and underpinning it all, is promoting effective governance. This means inclusive governments in Baghdad and Erbil working to overcome the key disagreements on oil revenues and DIBs. And it means the centre working with the governorates to deliver services that people demand, especially around education, public works and health. Addressing these challenges successfully would benefit everyone in Iraq, irrespective of their religion or their ethnic background. The second priority, and one which we've been working on particularly deeply, especially here in Kurdistan, is security sector reform. We want a security sector reform that creates security forces capable of preventing future insurgencies and of securing Iraq's borders. The watchword here is normalisation, and that means, in our view, transition from green to blue, especially at local level, and towards the state having a monopoly on control of its armed and security forces across the country and within Iraq's constitutional framework. That, we believe, would help ensure that security forces across Iraq and across Kurdistan enjoy the trust and support of its population. Third priority is economic and financial reform, where a more fiscally sustainable and responsive state with an empowered finance ministry addresses reconstruction across the country and takes measures to stem corruption and eventually reforms the banking and public sectors. Fourth, and crucially, is improving human rights, inclusion and social protection for vulnerable groups, especially for women, children and religious and ethnic minorities across the country. We must all help, and we are all helping, create conditions where IDPs can return home and camps can close in line with humanitarian principles. And longer term, this means sustained reconciliation and counter-extremism efforts, including education, that turn future generations away from malign influence. And the fifth priority that we've been discussing across the country has been creating an improved business environment. That means increasing investor confidence and opportunities for international businesses to invest in Iraq's economy and, crucially, as we've seen with issues in different parts of the country, create jobs. This means addressing issues that would open up Iraq for business, including reforming investment laws, including procurement procedures, and building an education system that produces a qualified and motivated workforce in the country. We believe that the international community is already active across these fields. We believe there's a great deal of potential for us to do more and to coordinate more across these fields, and we need to talk more about it. And we believe that from our conversations, from our discussions, that the international community has the political will, the resources, the expertise and the motivation to work on that. For our part, we are working across all these areas. We're investing heavily in terms of finance, in terms of people, in terms of intellectual property, to work with Iraq, to rebuild Iraq, and we will remain a friend and partner for Iraq and the Kurdistan region of Iraq for as long as we're welcome here. Thank you.
Thank you. As you're leaving early, so I want to ask you a question now, as it is in my mind. Obviously, economy is a key part of stabilization, and United Kingdom have issued a credit license for £10 billion, was it last year or 2 years ago? Will this program still be ongoing with the new government, and how much has been utilized by Iraqi government, as far as you know?
I don't have these figures at my fingertips just now, but I do know that we had our UK Export Finance, which is the government body who supports British exports and working with British exporters working with countries around the world by extending these lines of finance. They were here in Iraq just a month or two ago, I think it was, including up here in Kurdistan, looking especially at infrastructure opportunities, working with Iraqi partners and Kurdish partners.
So we're going to see some UK sterling pounds in Iraq soon?
I absolutely hope so. We've got companies here who are ready to break ground on big infrastructure projects. We just need the partners in the local governments to help with that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I go next to Eric Strating. He is the Deputy Ambassador of Netherlands in Iraq, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Delighted to be here and talk to you about the role of the international community. But I have to be honest, I almost declined the invitation. I'm new in Iraq, and I just entered my 5th week in Baghdad. This is my first visit to Erbil. I was not sure I was able yet to tell such a distinguished public what the role of the international community should do in helping Iraqis achieve stability, reconciliation, state building, and prosperity. But I'm here, so I decided to come anyway, because Iraq and the Netherlands have reached an important moment in their bilateral relations. Iraq is one of the so-called focus countries of the new Dutch government, and the embassy has been instructed by headquarters to write a brand new multi-annual strategy for the Netherlands and Iraq, which was approved earlier this month. So it's brand new, and Iraq may also have a new government very soon. So this is a great coincidence, and people have huge expectations. So I decided that despite me being new, this was the right moment to share a little bit about this new strategy with you. So my intervention will have a more bilateral character, indicating what the Dutch, as a member of the international community, wants to do with Iraq. By the way, the international community is being used often as an expression, but let me assure you, in reality, it does not exist. Iraq is a proud and independent country. It has an abundance of natural resources and can be qualified as a middle-income country. So in our view, it does not need large amounts of financial assistance for its stability, but instead knowledge exchange, capacity building programs, and technical assistance. That is what we think we can contribute. Our new strategy is based on finding common ground between our two countries, on finding topics where our interests converge, on topics where we as Dutch can provide added value. To put it in simple terms, things that we are good at and that Iraq needs for its stability. We have closely coordinated our new strategy with the government of Iraq and the Kurdistan regional government, which have a primary responsibility to address Iraq's current challenges. And we wanted to make sure we made the right choices. So based on these consultations and on what we have to offer, we have chosen not 5 priorities as the British did, but 4. Security, migration, work and income, and human rights. To start with security, there can be no stability in Iraq without security. There will be no prosperity without stability. Iraq's progress starts with security. As we know, ISIS still has a presence and new threats can arise. Until now, the Netherlands has focused on its efforts to militarily defeat ISIS, but in this new phase, we will focus our assistance beyond that on training and capacity building. Training in leadership of the Iraqi army, training of Iraqi special forces, as well as advice to the Iraqi Ministry of Defense and its military academies. Dutch military and civilian experts will work in Baghdad and Erbil, in the anti-ISIS coalition, the new NATO capacity building mission, reform of the Kurdish sector, the security sector, and the EU advisory mission. Quite a big effort serving the interests of both the Netherlands and Iraq. Our second priority on migration. There's also clear Dutch interest in a stable Iraq. We would like to fight instability and insecurity as drivers for migration and make it easier for irregular Iraqi migrants, those that have no right to stay in the Netherlands, to return to their country. Their country needs them. We will step up our assistance to those returnees, but also to IDPs, the internally displaced persons in Iraq. We know the majority of refugees and a disproportionately large number of IDPs found shelter here in the Kurdistan region. A lot have already returned home, but some may not be able to return soon. They need more self-reliance by increasing opportunities for education and income generation, and we will help. The third, work and income. Young Iraqis need private sector development. Improved job opportunities will provide an alternative to migration and will mitigate the threat of extremists and thus contribute to the stability of Iraq. By working on improved employment, the Netherlands would like to focus its efforts on agriculture and water. Why these two? In the first place, because the Iraqi agriculture sector has been neglected and there's a huge potential for growth. The Netherlands, at least compared to Iraq, is only a small country. We have limited land and limited space, but yet we are, after the United States of America, the second largest agricultural exporter of the world. And to brag a little bit, that's quite a performance. How do we do that? Our agriculture is technology-driven and highly efficient. We have knowledge, expertise, and investments to offer in sustainable agriculture, agribusiness, and food innovation. And we would like to share that knowledge with Iraq. Second, within this work and income is our focus on water, because no agriculture without water. Water may actually be, in this context, Iraq's biggest problem. Without water for irrigation, any intervention in agriculture will fail. In Iraq, water is scarce, it's polluted, it's salinized. The Netherlands may be the #1 water country in the world. We are active all over the globe. And once again, we would like to share our water knowledge with Iraq. Finally, human rights. You may think that Western countries always talk about human rights. And that is true. For the Netherlands, human rights are a cornerstone of our foreign policy. We are convinced that respect for human rights is a prerequisite for sustainable stability anywhere. No economic growth without stability, and no stability without respect for human rights. So we believe that Iraq must improve the human rights of minorities, women, and LGBT. This is a precondition for prosperity. Not because the UN or the EU or the West or the Netherlands say so, but because Iraq needs it to become a stable and prospered nation. Only with respect for human rights will Iraq become attractive for foreign investment. That is our conviction. On all of this, we as the Netherlands, we should, and we will work together. With the EU, which plays a very active role in Iraq, and I'm happy to see my colleague Don Ramon being prominent in this forum. We'd really support that. With the EU, we work together. With NATO, with organizations like IMF and World Bank. But above all, we would work together with Iraq. As I said before, Iraq as an oil-producing country may not be in need of large sums of money. Nevertheless, for our new strategy, we have around $50 million annually available And this does not include our contribution through international organizations, such as, for example, UNDP's funding facility for stabilization, where we contribute around 60 million since 2016. But better than all this money would be the involvement of Dutch companies. Now, here's an important point for the Iraqi side. Just in a small conversation before this meeting, an Iraqi diplomat stimulated me to be blunt and honest, and I would like to do so. The business climate in Iraq must be improved for Dutch companies to come here. It may need a complete overhaul. Many Dutch companies still have payment issues from the past. There's no proper dispute settlement mechanism. There are legitimate security concerns. There are visa and residency issues and problems with customs and corruption. I'll be honest, under these circumstances, it is difficult for the embassy to invite Dutch companies to come to Iraq. But there's also something that we as the Netherlands and maybe the wider international community should do. I know that we are not easy with granting visa to Iraqis that want to visit the Netherlands, so we also need to do something there. And the negative travel advice of our government to come to Iraq does not help companies either to come. We as an embassy are working hard to change that. So in conclusion, there's a lot of good news about the situation in Iraq, and there are a lot of prospects, but there are also many challenges. I am convinced that with a joint effort of Iraq and the international community, better days are ahead for this great country and for the Kurdistan region. We as the Netherlands hope to contribute, as do many other countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. There's plenty of food for thought for sure, but I'm going to wait until the other two distinguished speakers speak, then we will come back to some of the points you raised. Now I go to Ambassador Bruno. Clearly he's been in Iraq for a year and he knows quite a bit. And if you ever want to have really good pasta, you should accept his dinner invitation, the embassy. Bruno, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't know how to start because in reality, I had prepared something which, it fits with a title, with your suggestion, previous suggestions. But now, I must say, you stole my pride in the sense that I was absolutely certain that I was the least, the youngest, inverted commas, in Iraq, at least the one with the least experience compared to all of you. 99.9% of the public I told to, they are normally more experienced than me about Middle East. So instead of giving the list of what Italy is doing, okay, I will try to give a bit of that during my short intervention. I will try to focus on my personal and professional experience to give you a hint of how a new ambassador to Middle East experiences his daily job in a country like Iraq. I arrived, as Rad was saying, almost 1 year ago, so you win in this kind of competition. He is younger than me, but I arrived, unfortunately, the very night our consul here certainly remembers that I landed exactly at the moment there was the earthquake in the north part of Iraq in Iran. So I could immediately put in place, as soon as I landed, my previous experience in emergency and humanitarian help. This is one thing Italy does here. We had several projects going on, and we do believe that that kind of project will help, as Eric was saying, stabilizing the society, and through that give a wider space for the authorities, all kind of institutions, local, central, federal, in order to build up the ties within the Iraqi society. Helping, for example, as we do in KRG, above all in KRG, but we are planning to expand it, the local authorities, through the Italian experience, is another tool how to convince grassroots level, but also institutional level, Iraqi, Kurd responsibles, to use their function, their role for an improvement, for a better use of their power. At the actually in an hour time, more or less, in Italy, in Rimini, there is a similar seminar. We were invited, the consul and myself, so please, I would like to emphasize that we prefer to be here rather than in Italy. And this seminar is organized by the Federation, the Association of the Italian Municipalities. They've been active in KRG since, I think, if I remember well, 2010. They keep going with their projects, and they do believe, I was talking to them a couple of days ago, and they are absolutely certain that there is a lot of space for them to express what the Italian experience in terms of delocalization, local authorities, services provided by local authorities, and not waiting all the time from the central power to provide this kind of service. These are messages, these are experiences that, at least we think, worked in Italy, worked in Europe, which could be translated into the Iraqi reality. Another aspect I will steal from my previous colleagues, security. I arrived November last year, as I said, and Italy was and still is by far the second largest contributor to the international coalition. We are reducing our presence, but still we are the second largest. According to our constitution, like many other European countries, and not only Europeans, according to our constitution, we cannot participate in a combat kind of coalition. So we are we've been, since the very first moment, a non-combat contributor to the coalition. We are quite, I would say, very much present in what you were saying about the blue training and capacity building of the Iraqi forces. So local police, with our carabinieri, above all with our carabinieri, this Italian military police / police corps experience, but we're also present in the so-called green area, so the military area. As an Italian ambassador, I should emphasize the importance of switching, as you were saying, from green to blue. In reality, I would like to use this forum to emphasize that I don't believe that it's over with a green necessity. ISIS is still very much present. And in terms of security, as you were rightly saying, without security, physical security of the society, there will not be any stabilization. The green necessity is still there. We all read of the daily, constant attacks, kidnapping. I mean, you are the expert of the local situation, of the local society. So you know what I mean, and how much it is still needed. Lastly, I don't want to take too much of this part of the time, and I will leave it to, just in case if there are any questions about economy. I was saying I'm the least experienced in the Middle East as a head of mission. This is my first time as an ambassador in the Middle East. But I've been working almost 29 years now. In February, it will be 29 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, practically all the time, trade and business. So I pretend to have a bit of experience in that area. Iraq is no different to, for example, Kazakhstan, where I was ambassador. Kyrgyzstan, it was a completely different game, but Pakistan as well. I was posted in another oil-producing country, Venezuela, when it was not that bad as today. So Iraq is no different. I don't know whether I should be saying unfortunately or fortunately. The rules are the same anywhere. In Italy, in Europe, in the Middle East, in South America, there are a set of rules, a pattern which must be followed anywhere. I very much appreciated what you just said. It's not UN, it's not EU, it's pure common sense. When we ambassadors talk to our interlocutors, I remember the President of the Republic, Dr. Massoud, the first thing he told me when I presented the credential, he was, no, you must convince the Italian companies to come. The Italian companies are willing to come. We have, as an embassy, the Italian embassy, we have no problem whatsoever to convince them. On the contrary, Italy has, compared to Holland, compared to UK, we have roughly 87% of our industrial output produced by small and medium-sized companies. 92% of this percentage, 92%, is made by companies with less than 50 employees. So you cannot compare to big concerns, multinationals, and so on. These kind of companies, if they're not paid their arrears, €500,000, which is nothing for a multinational, for them it's life or death. It's bankruptcy or increase in their budget, next year budget. So that set of rules must be followed. And it's no use in saying you must convince your companies. Our companies are convinced to come. Because you know it better than me. Iraq is the second largest producer of oil in OPEC. Iraq, since 2017, is the third largest exporter to Italy of energy, after Russia, Azerbaijan, and Iraq now. So we are interested, very much interested, in having a reliable partner. Because Italy is desperately seeking for energy. Because our small and medium-sized companies are desperate to come in a country like Iraq and improve our substantial deficit. It's a good deficit. I'm not complaining about that. It's good because the second largest industrial power in the European Union after Germany, Italy, needs energy. So we do need your cooperation. Help us to work better with all the things which were mentioned before. Visa, all the regulations in terms of you know it. Have you ever worked with a bureaucratic counterpart allowing you to do what you are requested to do? You know what I mean. So thank you very much, and okay, we'll keep talking about that.
Grazie.
Prego.
I go to a friend, Hansi Escobar. Buenos dias. Obviously, Hansi is also in Baghdad, and he's working hard, and they make good paella, but it's not as good as my mother-in-law. But the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good morning to everybody. I want to thank you, Laura, for inviting me. I'm very proud to be here. I would like you permission to take off my Spanish ambassador hat, put it aside, and put my think-tank hat. I'm a proud member of the Spanish Instituto Elcano, and to be able to talk about something a bit different than what we have been talking about here. And I will tell you why, because I thought we were, when you sent me a message yesterday, Hansi, stick to the point. But I thought we were going to talk about challenges more than stability, So I said, I'm not going to change my speech because, my colleagues just said what they had to do. Let me just tell you two things as ambassador. Spain is very active, very, very much in the field of security in Iraq. We have 600 soldiers who have, in the last 3 years, formed over 25,000 soldiers, the Iraqi army. We are also in the present forming the Iraqi police. And me, myself, have been trying to put a lot of effort on the cultural side. Let me tell you that I brought the first flamenco group, last summer. They came, they did a concert in the National Theater in Baghdad. And it was the first time that the international group came to Baghdad in 10 years. So I was very proud to do that. And let me tell you something else. Next 5th of November, I'm organizing a great flamenco concert in the Citadel of Erbil, and I hope you will all be able to come. It's at 6 o'clock next Monday, 5th of November. So let me put as I said, my think tank hat, and let me tell you something, because I would like to talk about long-term challenges that Iraq has to face. It's a very completely different thing, but I think it will give us a good way to say also what's the role of the international community and what should be the role of the Iraqi political class, including the Kurdish and everybody. You have to think about the future. And, to face them, to face these long-term challenges, no one can help if the Iraqis don't help themselves. The analysis of the challenges show that Iraq problems cannot be solved only through the outside aid. And let me tell you, because I'm going to give you some very interesting data, maybe you know some of it, but when I read the paper with which I am going to be based, I was really shocked and surprised, because these challenges are really big. As I said, the data come from the World Bank, from the IMF, and also I'm indebted to a very good report written at the beginning of this year by Anthony Cothersman. It was called Iraq After Daesh, the other side of the victory. Let me just go very quickly through these challenges. First, population growth. Let me give you just a few data. 1950, Iraq had 5.2 million inhabitants. 1980, 13 million. 90, 18. 2003, when the American intervention started, 25. Nowadays, 39. But look at the data. 2030, which is 12 years away, 53 billion. And let's go even further. 2050, 76 million inhabitants will be inhabited in Iraq. So that's a big challenge that little by little we have to cope and we have to think of. Let's be clear. Iraq is the fastest growing country in the Middle East. Faster than Egypt and Algeria, and this is something we have to cope. Second thing, closely linked to this idea is what we call the youth bulge, common to all the MENA countries. That 800,000 graduates from secondary school will reach the labor market this year. 40% of the population is less than 14 years old, which means they don't know anything about Saddam, and practically they don't know anything about the first years of the American intervention. And the youth exclusion due to lack of education, lack of employment, trauma, is probably one of the most important vectors of radicalizations. We were talking yesterday about that, and I think this is all linked. Another interesting to me challenge, which is also, let's say, a bit linked, which is hyper-urbanization. Iraq is already sharply affected by the combination of migration from the countryside and the impact of internal violence in urban population. And to be frank, this hyper-urbanization has dealt a blow to the self-sustaining rural economies, which is one of the most important aspects, and I will talk to you later about that, on what we should do in the future. Another great dilemma, and the figures are there, housing deficit. Iraq has a large and growing housing deficit following decades of sanctions, conflict, and substantial underinvestment. The current demands, Iraq needs 200,000 units per year. But due to this deficit, in 2010, the Ministry of Housing said that they needed already in 2010 2 million units to cope this deficit. And furthermore, the West Bank published just a few months ago a new report who said that probably Iraq will need in 2020, which means day after tomorrow, from 3 to 3.5 million housing units. And this is something interesting to talk, because probably one of the things that we should do in a minute is to invest heavily on housing. Two more things. 30 to 40% of the population is live in very poor housing conditions due to this, precisely to this deficit. And housing remains, and this is a key thing also, unaffordable for many Iraqi families. Another big challenge, if not one of the biggest ones, with regard to the budget and spending, public sector reform. As you all know, the state is a predominant employer since the times of the Republic, since the time of ages. Employment and promotion, unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, employment and promotion in the civil service have become increasingly non-meritocratic, and this is all over the world. Iraqis want a secure job in the public sector because of the job security, higher salaries, and let's be frank, one of the most generous pension systems in the world. We should try to find out, what people get as a pension here. You will be surprised. It's 2, 3, 4 times the money I will get in Spain once I get I retire, if I ever retire. So what's the mantra here? The degree of employment generation in the public sector is unsustainable. Let me give you a few figures. Between 2003 and 2015, core public sector expanded from 0.9 million to over 3 million civil servants. That means 42% of all the jobs in Iraq. If you include the state companies, it goes up to 50%. The bill of these civil servants is estimated at $30 billion in 2016. That means 18% of the GDP, which is an extremely high figure compared to other oil exporters and even other MENA region community. To be frank, to introduce reforms in this subject is very difficult. The cost is so high that it is difficult for any government to buy its way out of the problem. And probably Iraq will need reforms that will previously create a massive new demand for more productive jobs, especially in the private sector. And I will get back to that in a few minutes. There are more challenges, and I could spend here an hour talking about the challenges. Very briefly, let me just tell you some of them. Water. We just saw the problems we had this summer. It will become, if it has not become yet, an international question for Iraq. Dams in Turkey, in Iran, in Syria. Water is going to be a very important subject in the future. Quality of Iraqi governance, corruption, lack of transparency, barriers to create new businesses, the oil curse. We'll talk about this. I read yesterday, I think McKinley published a report yesterday that said due to the growing climate change's consequences, we're seeing bigger and bigger storms, they think that the transition will be done in 2035. So that means that oil after 2035, and this is for all, you're not going to be able to depend on oil so much as you would do now. So you have to start to think about renewable energies, and we'll go back to that. I'm going to finish now. Yes, I wanted to give you an overview because, let's be frank, Iraq is still a country with vast opportunities. But these challenges, not only the short-term challenges, we were talking yesterday about, we need to start the reconstruction. We need to try to reconcile the Sunni. We need to fix the problems with the Kurdish regional government. But, these long-term challenges have to be addressed immediately. Success will probably require years of patient effort and careful diagnostics and planning. Furthermore, and this is my key message here, and I do it as a think tanker and not as an ambassador because I cannot share it, but my idea is that Iraqi political class has to look beyond the immediate priorities. It has to look also beyond the tensions that divide them and find a way of working together. Dealing with these challenges will be a matter of years, if not decades. At the same time, and my colleagues have been able to say what we are doing here, and we will still be doing, Iraq cannot succeed on its own. It will need outside technical financial aid for years. But it is critical that the Iraqi leaders understand that they alone must assume responsibilities for creating the necessary conditions to tackle these problems and to ensure success. I want to finish with a positive note, because the Ministry of Planning published at the beginning of this year, just before the conference of Kuwait, the so-called general framework of the National Plan for Reconstruction, where it practically put forward all the tasks that the country needs to tackle these challenges. Reform the administration, put the basis to promote the private sector and diversify the economy, fiscal and budget reforms, develop of the production capacities, support of the private sector, and improve the investment climate. This is, I have no doubt, but the key question here also is to develop the private sector. And we have little time. You know that although it's always easier than said than done, there you have this roadmap to face Iraq challenges. And let me just, 30 more seconds, please.
Have time.
To tell you, I was trying to talk, because I am not an economist myself. I like to talk about political Islam and all these things, and sometimes I get loose with it. But I asked some of my friends, Kurdish friends, I said, what do we do to develop the private sector? Because this is the key question. No? And he gave me some ideas. Let me just put them forward. Focus on housing, especially low-cost housing units, because you will be able to do it here. Fix the agriculture. You know that only 7% of the population, Iraqi population, the workforce is dedicated to agriculture. Agriculture needs small investments and is a labor-intensive activity. And somehow we have to come back and try. And people, we are importing probably tomatoes from Turkey and from Iran, and they're very cheap. And the local producers are having trouble to sell. I was told here that, for example, in Erbil, the Kurdish tomatoes cost 3-4 more times than the Turkish ones. However, people buy them because they're nicer, because they taste better. Well, we have to find out a way. Maybe you probably need a land reform. Probably you need to put some taxes to the let's say to the tomatoes that you're importing. So you have to develop some ideas on this area. Essential also, and my friend is a banker. Reform the banking system. There is no free market without a powerful banking system. You know that 90% of the laws that regulate are based on the 1974 Central Iraqi Bank law. And Iraq needs to develop retail banking, to offer mortgage to people, to be able to have a house, to offer personal credits. We just have small financial institutions. There are 40 banks in Iraq. I was shocked when I heard that. 40 banks, but they are just playing in the foreign exchange money. They get money, they're comfortable there because we make $450,000 a day, and that's it. So, as I said, it's very important to develop the bank system. And, of course, developing the private industrial tissue through loans to private companies. One last thing, and this is the real last thing, renewable energy. Iraq, Kurdistan, you have 310 days of sun. As I said, McKinsey said yesterday that, in 2035, oil prices will drop precisely because people are just going to move away from fossils. So it's time now to invest on renewable energy, and Iraq is very well placed. And you will be able to produce electricity. Maybe, Spain, and I finish here, really. Now, we have a very good example with Spain, the relation between Spain and Morocco. Spain made a loan of $600,000 to Morocco to build the biggest solar plant in the world. How are they paying? Selling us electricity. You have to find these ways of trying to promote these things. Anyhow, I just wanted to be a bit provocative. I hope I did it. I put back my ambassador hat just in case anybody wants to hit me. I'm over here. Thank you.
Well, muchas gracias. Thank you for this surgical and excellent analysis of our problems, as almost everybody talked about yesterday also, that we do know we have plenty of problems. One thing I could say, add positivity to it, is the new government. Yesterday they published a draft program of the new government, and the Prime Minister designate has been sitting on the side for the last 3-4 years, and he has certainly outlined and knows what is needed. I agree with you that we do have a problem of oil. Iraq has turned to an oil dependent state, and unfortunately we have copied Nigeria's model instead of, say, Norwegian model, where the oil becomes revenue for the entire country and becomes the driver to develop the other sectors at the time that almost all the other sectors have declined because we really don't need anything else, or so to speak. I mean, even here in Kurdistan, I have seen it that agriculture has gone back, crafting and small industrial plants and all that. And one of the major problems we have, although it's an irony, where Iraq is the second largest oil producer, yet cost of energy for small businesses and for companies is much higher than our neighboring countries. And for that, the Iraqi producers cannot compete when it comes to pricing with our neighboring countries. That's why our food and our everyday food consumption comes from Turkey and Iran. Iraqi farmers produce potato, tomato, and so on, and it's more expensive. So the import, despite the cost of transportation, is still cheaper for the Iraqi consumer. So we do have that problem, and you rightly outlined it. I'm going to open the floor for questioning, and maybe I'll combine between my own questions and the floor, and we will see how the whole thing goes. We have a bit of time. I hear the first one here.
My name is Vladimir Vilgeberg. I had a question. Maybe some of you can answer it. So we mentioned a lot about the new security strategy and the new NATO mission. So what role Western countries will play? What's the role basically of the Peshmerga in this new NATO mission? Can maybe some of you answer this question, if you can? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take one more. Kak Jabar. اگر با کورتی بکیم ولا بترجمه دکم
دیارە من بابەتی سەرەکی سەقامگیریە، یعنی سەقامگیری ناوچەی ڕۆژهەڵاتە و سەقامگیری عێراق بە گشتی هەرێمی کوردستانیش، یعنی بە تایبەت پەیوەندە بە سەقامگیری گشتی هەموو ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست. من زیاتر ئەمویست پرسیارەکانم ئاڕاستەی ئادەم کەم، بەڵام ڕۆژت، یعنی پێشەوەی پرسیارەکە چونکە ئیسارەی مەوزوعێکی کرد، باسی مەسەلەی ئاسایشی کرد و باسی مەسەلەی چۆنیەتی ڕێخستنەوەی هێزەکانی عێراقی کرد بە هەرێمی کوردستانەوە لە ژێر فەرماندەی عێراق. ئەمویست دیدی ئەو ئادەم زیاتر بزانن لەسەر ئەو بابەتە، بەڵام مادام ئەو ڕۆیشت بۆ ئەو پرسیارە، من ناچار پرسیارەکانم ئەو پرسیارم دوایی ئێستا پاش ڕوونکردنەوەیە کە ئادەم پرسیارەکە ڕووەکەمە جێگری سەفیری هۆڵەندا ئێریک ئان لەگەڵ بڕۆنۆ بڵێن سەفیری بریتانیا، چونکە ئەو دوو وڵاتە زیاتر ڕۆڵیان هەیە لە هەرێمی کوردستان بە تایبەتی. ئیسپانیا تا ئێستا هیچ ڕۆڵێکی نییە لە هەرێمی کوردستان لە ڕووی سەربازیەوە، چێ وەکو هاوکاری مەشق یان هاوکاری هێزی پێشمەرگەی کوردستان زیاتر کاروبارەکانی لە عێراقا. لەبەرەوەیە من هیچ بە بەڕێز هاوسنگ ناڵێن لەبەرەوەی چونکە ڕەنگە بڵێن لەگەڵ کوردستان. دیارە بەڵێ ئێمە هەمووش من طبعا خۆم نەناسان، من جەباریاوەرە بە مینداری گشتی وەزارەتی پێشمەرگەم لەبەرەوە لەو بوارەوە قساکەم. دیارە سەقامگیری هەموو عێراق بێگومان زۆر گرنگە بۆ کە باسی مەسەلەی ئابووری و وەبەرهێنانیان کردە وڵاتانە لە عێراق و لە هەرێمی کوردستان کە ڕۆڵێکی گەورەی هەیە. ئێمە ئەزانی لە دوای 2004ەوە تەحەدی یەکەم قاعیدە بوو لە عێراقدا، قاعیدە کۆتایی هات دوای لە ساڵی 2008 و دواوە کێشە لە نێوانی هەرێم و بەغا دروست بوو. ئەو بۆ تەحەدیەک، یعنی کێشەیەک بوو خەریک بوو ببێتە گرژیەکی سەربازی، توانرا هێمنی ڕاگیریە. دوایەوە 2014 داعش هات بۆ هەڕەشەیەکی گەورە لەسەر عێراق بە تەواوەتی. دوای وردەوردە کۆتایی هاتنی داعش لە 2017 بینیمان تەحەدی کێشەکانی عێراق و هەرێم جارێکی تر هاتەوە، بە تایبەتی کە ئێمە ڕووداوی ئۆکتۆبەرمان بینی هێرشی هێزەکانی عێراق بۆ سەر ئەو ناوچانە پاش سەرکەوتنیان لەو هێزانە. بۆ ئەوەی ئەوان بزانن تا ئێستا بڵێن کە باسی هەماهەنگی یان هاوکاری یان هاوبەشی لە ئیشکردنەکەن لە نێوانی هێزەکانی هەرێم و هێزەکانی حکومەتی فیدڕاڵ، هیچ جۆرە پرینسیپێک یان میکانزمێک یان ئالیەتێکی یاسایی تا ئێستا نەڕۆژراوە. لەبەرەوەیە من وەکو کەسێکی سەربازی ئێستش هەلومەرجەکە زۆر بەناسک ئەزانم، لەبەرەوەی ئێمە هێڵێکی 1000 کیلومتر هەیە پێشتر هێزەکانمان بەرامبەر بە داعش بوو بەڵام ئێستا لەو 1000 کیلومترە لەم بەری هێزی پێشمەرگەی لەو بەری هێزی عێراقیە هەر گرژێکی سیاسی ببێ گرژێکی سەربازی دروست دەکات لەگەڵ خۆیان ئەوش واکە سەخامگیری ئاسایش تێک بچێ لە هەموو عێراقا ئایا ئەمەوێت دیدی ئەوان بزانم بۆ ئەم بابەتە دیدیان بەڕاستی ئادەم شتێکی ئیسارە کرد بە ڕێزی و ڕۆژت بەڵام دیدی ئەو وڵاتانە کە هەماهنگن بە تایبەتی هۆڵەندا و بە تایبەتی ئیتاڵیا ڕۆڵێکی هەبوو بە تایبەتی لە مەسەلەی مەشقکردن دیدیان چییە بۆ هەماهنگی بۆ هاوبەشی ئیشکردن بۆ چۆنیتی ئیدارەدانی ئەو ئەزمەیە کە ڕەنگە ئەگەر هەر گرژێک هەبێت تەسی لەسەر وەزعی گشتی زۆر سپاس
تانیا خان
Here we go. Sorry, not very technically inclined. I think that the main title, when we're talking about legitimate stability in Iraq, I think one of the things that are very important that in order for us to have actual stability, we must, so it's more of a statement rather than a question, is that all groups must participate. No section of society should be marginalized. And I say this as a woman, and especially as we're seeing the role of women going back in Iraq, and they are not real participants. But, you know, so every time when we do talk about stability, everybody's talking about economic stability, they're talking about defense, they're talking about all these things. But I think this is one of the main roles that the international community can play, and that is putting more pressure on the Iraqi politicians and the Iraqi government to be more inclusive, especially for women and other groups. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll take the three, then you can go. Have a go. Eric first.
Start with the final statement, as I take it, it wasn't a question. I fully support that. I listed the 4 priorities of the Netherlands, and within these 4 priorities we have so-called cross-cutting themes, as we call them, and gender or women's rights or whatever you want to call it is one of them. And on all 4 priorities on all levels, that will be one of the main things that we look at for the same reason as what I mentioned on human rights. It's not for the EU or the UN or the Netherlands or the West, but it's for Iraq. Iraq will move forward in a better way if it's more inclusive, it's more diverse, and if women's rights are respected, it will enrich society, government, and private business. On the questions on security, I have to admit that I'm not a specialist at all. Obviously, for the stability of Iraq, it is essential that, let's call it Erbil and Baghdad, work out a model where they work together very constructively and avoid all sorts of conflicts. And of course, an arrangement between the military sides would be part of that. We will focus our security contributions, and we will both target, let's say, the Iraq security forces and the Peshmerga forces. That's important in our policy. That's important domestically, politically in the Netherlands, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Ansi?
I have little to say, unfortunately, about the military in the Kurdistan. You know what, I mentioned, and we were, at a certain moment, 3-4 years ago, we were here and our army was here. I don't really know why I'm not here. Maybe we'll come soon. I would like to talk about women. Let's jump over here because you're completely right. And probably one of the things I miss over here, come on, it's 50% of the population. You know, if the Italian ambassador permits me, you know, he had a great initiative just a few days ago. He organized a meeting with all international communities. May I say it? Did you talk already, by the way? Or she was with you? Well, then, well, you know that. But everybody should know. You know that we attend, I mean, I wasn't there, unfortunately, but my deputy was there. Attend a wonderful meeting with women parliamentarians, trying to find out exactly. And I think it's essential, and we're very happy to have them there, and I think they have a very important role to play. So this is what I have to say. You will have all our support, and not the message over here. But to be frank, how many women ministers do we get in the next government?
Bruno?
Yeah. I switch the terms. I start with security, the defense, strictly speaking, the defense aspect. NATO mission and the role of Peshmerga. As I was saying, Italy is the second largest contributor in terms of men and women here since 2014. The alpha and omega for our presence here, you must work together, full stop. If I'm allowed, just for the sake of discussion, when you mention we have 1,000 kilometers, I was listening to the translation, okay, he's mentioning the border with Syria. No, you were mentioning KRG and Iraq. For us, it doesn't exist. Our presence in Erbil, in Suleimania, is to help the Peshmerga, like NATO mission will do. But as a part of a federal Iraq. Of course, you have your specificities. It would be silly of me to pretend that hundreds of years of history will be wiped out just because we decide for you. No, it doesn't work like this. We all know it. But our presence has a meaning in terms of a wider cooperation, NATO as well. Just to answer your question. Our problem with NATO, as a members of EU and NATO and the wider coalition, 74 members, imagine so, is that we have to avoid overlapping. We have a civil kind of civil European Union mission to assist the Iraqi authorities in order to speed up and improve the security system reform. We have a coalition, as I said, 74 members, training and helping the Iraqi forces, the Peshmerga forces. We have a NATO now growing up mission, up to 500 members. In few weeks, the key issue for us as a bilateral partner, as a member of these different levels of cooperation, is to avoid overlapping. But this is our problem, of course. The second part, the third question. May I, always for the sake of discussion, may I disagree with you in the sense that there is no worsening of the women's situation here, not only in Iraq, in overall. I would, on a private basis, we'll talk of the Italian situation. It's not worsening because it's not getting better. This is the problem. The world is moving on, and we're still talking of a women's situation which is simply unacceptable. But it's not, I would say, Hansi rightly so was mentioning this meeting we had at the Italian embassy, organized by UN, organized logistically by us, but by European Union with female parliamentarians. There was also a very active Kurdish representative. Let me be honest, it is important what we do, but it's not enough. It is necessary to start teaching people in the school, your sons, your daughters. This is where it comes from. That is why I started my intervention with the emergency, humanitarian help, you would say, and cooperation programs we have. We do believe that if you don't start there, you cannot pretend to see in our lifespan to see a real change at an institutional level. It is important, it is obviously important, and we've been discussing this, that more female ministers are expected to be in the next government, likewise in the KRG new government, because it's not only Baghdad's problem, it's everywhere. It's in Rome, the problem we have is in Washington, it's in Canberra.
Not in Spain.
No, Spain, no, because you are, you're not objective in this case. Yeah, so, but it is your job as well with, I don't know, your family, with my daughters. We must teach the new generation that they have to change their attitude. Just look at the social media now, how the youngsters use them, how the image of women is presented there. So it's not only an institutional political problem, I think. But we must be optimistic and work for that.
من نقر بقرة موصل لايكك زباري أور بمسألة أو خطة 1000 كيلومتري باست كرد سقام جيري العراق بو كردستان بدرزية كاد لهمان كاد بو قشتي عراق براستي زي خوش حالية كلاياني كردي سياسي استهمي شوتو بغداد واستاد بينين تنانت كبهيزة ودسنو بغداد وبجداريشيان لحكومتي داهاتوي فدرال كأوي قراري سياسي كردي جسا بشويتي عاملة لانم حزب كان اگرتي بتاك تشوينه وكجاران كونين بلان برياري سياسي كردي استا اوي بقرو قرانو بو بغداد بويا او خطا رنگا بوشوي جاران نبي وكالبو بيتوا ولو باورش دام لقر حكومتي نويو هوي كدكتور عادل سيد عادل عبد المهدي زياتر كدوستاتي لقر همو لأنا كردي كان بهيزا لو باوردام كوا او ببتا هوكاريشي بهيز بو اوي سقام جيري سياسي عسكري تنانت زياتريش برفيداني هاوكاري سربازي و بيشمرقا ببتا مؤسساتي ترو تنانت او مشاكلاني كبيشتريش هبو لبوجو لدابين كردني بيداوستيكاني بيشمرقا و دانی حقوقی پێشمەرگە کە لە زۆربەی بودجەکانی ساڵانی تر دایمەن پشتگوێ دەخرا کە لە بودجە و پێداویستەکانی پێشمەرگە لەو ساڵانەی داهاتوو کە زیاتر ببێ یعنی ئەو هیوایەمان زۆرە کە ئەوەش بەشێک بیتن لەو سەقامگیریانەی کە ئەو کۆکاری سەقامگیری کە پێویستە لە کوردستان بێ. I go back to Hansi as he wanted a contribution of some sort.
I just wanted to say something which is really amazing. I mean, I've even been surprised. The actual Spanish government has 16 ministers, okay? 16. 10 are women. So, well, I think maybe this is the way to move it over here. You know that, let me give you an example. I don't know if it happens in the foreign ministry. My promotion in the foreign ministry, we are 27-year-old diplomat already. My promotion in the foreign ministry was the first one. I mean, when I passed my exam in 1991, there were 35 women in the Spanish foreign ministry out of 900. Nothing. When we passed, we were 31. There were 15 men, 16 women. So in 1 year, 50% more they came. Well, most of them have become ambassadors before us. Because of this positive, you have to, and they are, I mean, I don't complain because it's the way it is. They complain that this is not happening, for example, in the Ministry of Defense, where women start to enter late, and we don't have not one single general in the Spanish army. Why? Because they're still very, this is a escalafon, you got to go over here, and now the actual Minister of Defense, which is a lady, says we have to change that. So we might have seen lieutenant colonels who jump now to generals. So you have to do something like that. I just want to say that.
The gentleman there.
Hi, everybody.
Can you stand up, please?
Okay. Dr. Basil from Rafidin Center for Dialogue. First of all, we appreciate your contribution in Iraq. The title of this session called Legal Stabilization in Iraq. My question for all of you, what are the standards of this legal stability, and who are the responsible to distinguish if this stability legal or not? Thank you.
Okay, the lady there.
Thank you very much. I'm Nazan Bejikhani from the University of Bristol, and I'm working at the Center for Gender and Violence Research. I come back to the question raised by Tanya Gully because it's a fundamental issue, the inclusion of women. And also, I would go further and talk about the security for women. Who is protecting the security of women in this country? We all know that without the security of women, no sustainable security or stability can be achieved. My colleague Dilawar yesterday said that what's going on here in this forum and in the panels is a reflection of the political reality, meaning that no inclusion of women, even in this forum, is the reproduction of the patriarchal culture deeply rooted in the social and political mentality of people here in this country. I think it's a justification that cannot be accepted, dear Dilawar. You are unconsciously reproducing the patriarchal norms and values which are so deeply rooted here. How can we face this challenge? This is a fundamental issue. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So there.
Adnan from African Center for Dialogue, RCD. Point for Mr. Eric. You mentioned the subject of equality on two sides, gender and LGBT. It's okay and good to look for gender equality in Iraq, but I have 2 points to mention on the matter of LGBT. First, the legislation of LGBT is contradicting the Iraqi constitution. The Iraqi constitution stating that Islam is a major source of legislation. And all of you know the matter of LGBT with Islam. Second point, the announced support to LGBT may give the extremists an excuse to act violently, you know. And all of you know, some of them are looking for an excuse to act violently. Thanks.
Eric?
Yes, to start with the last question, I did not completely understand what you were getting at, but let me say that equality in all its forms, including sexual orientation, is the cornerstone of Dutch society and Dutch politics. It's extremely important for us. Now, that may be different in other cultures, but there are international norms, there are international treaties on human rights that everybody agreed to, and they leave no misunderstanding about the importance of equality. That's one. And these international norms and these international treaties are universal. Human rights are universal. They're not related to culture, they're not related to tradition or customs, they're universal. So in that sense, they're applicable equally to the Netherlands as they are to Iraq. So that would be my answer to your question. Moving to the question about what standards determine whether there is legitimate stability, I would almost say the same thing. There are international rules and norms within the framework of the United Nations that we all as United Nations members agree to, and they give us the standard that we have to live up to. And there's not always much room for maneuvering, and there's not always much room for our own traditions. Important as they are, they always all need to live up to a certain minimum standard. The question on women, I was maybe I'll share a personal experience what happened to me yesterday when at the embassy I was visited by a 16-year-old girl from Babylon province who was speaking up for children's rights and girls' rights. And while doing so, she criticized in the past the governor of Babylon, who in her vision was setting the country back 50 years. And when she got back to her home was burned down. And she decided that would not discourage her, and she continued her work and started to try to help children of internally displaced persons suffering from cancer. And because she was a girl and because she was young, she got actually sued by the government. Now, this is not happening everywhere all the time, but it is happening. And this girl had the courage and showed the courage to step up and do. And if you do that, then you contribute to changes from within, and you don't just rely on the foreign countries, the international community to support you. They will do that as well, but it's got to come from in between. And this girl was a great inspiration to me, and I'm sure she is to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to go?
If I'll try to answer. It's very inspiring what you just said. And I was thinking while you were talking, while Eric was talking, remember Bertolt Brecht's very famous statement, very unfortunate the country which needs heroes. We all hope that our countries do not need heroes, do not need a 16-year-old girl who has to stand and defend what should be obvious in front of a powerful politician or a military or a soldier. We all hope that with our daily, constant endeavor, and I emphasize this aspect because I actually do believe, personally believe that we have to start ourselves to fight against this kind of discriminations. It's not Iraq, a special case. I was posted, once again, I'm sorry to give you personal experiences, but I was posted in Pakistan, and I was writing a little article on, now I don't remember how it's called in Urdu, but the honor killings. Actually, after writing a longer, boring article on statistics and so on and so forth, I discovered that the content of that article was, in reality, misoriented, because it's not Islam, it's not religion. In India, in Hindu, the majority at least of India is major, the honor killing was tenfold more than Iraq. So it's not a matter of religion. It's a matter of social habits. We must accept that, I read it last week, I think, a 15-year-old boy was probably killed because of his supposed sexual orientation. It's tragic. It's absolutely unacceptable, and we must teach first ourselves and then those who are around us that we must change this attitude, because sexual orientation cannot be a matter of discrimination. Women must be in the government, but in my country, I was mentioning this during that meeting we referred to before. In my country, the Prime Minister's media office came out with several actually, intervention in the public and private channels in Italy, saying that in Italy, women get on average 17% less salary than men in private sector. This is also unacceptable, but we must change it. Another quotation, Kennedy, don't ask what the government could do for you, but what you could do for your country and government.
Kennedy, no?
Kennedy.
Yeah. Nancy, but briefly, please.
Very, very briefly, Lauer, she's right. Maybe next year, you know. I know, I'm sorry, no. But look, and we don't have many women diplomats, but we have some. There's an EU, we have a Polish ambassador. I have a deputy. The Swedish embassy has a deputy. Maybe next year, instead of seeing the old faces, we should bring some new faith diplomacy, which we have very brave women in Baghdad. With regard to legitimate stability, and I finish over here, because the other subject is always very complicated to deal, to be frank, and I don't want to get in trouble. But you know, what we saw, I mean, I have to be frank. I have talked about these long-term challenges, which of course everybody has. You know, each country has it. But to be frank, after what I heard yesterday, the new arrival, I mean, the new elite, I mean, let's say presidencies that we have in Iraq give us some hope. I am really, I mean, I think this is the feeling that we got from this meeting. There are many things to do, but we have a good team of people there. President Saleh, AAM and the Prime Minister. I think we're going to be quite happy with most of the names the ministers are going to have around here. He has a free hand to choose them, and it's the time, and this is a key thing, it's the time for all the Iraqi politicians to move forward and try to bring some stability to the country, which is needed to start to do the reforms. And of course, among them is just to try to solve you know, the problems that we have had between the KRG and the federal government.
Okay, thank you. We have about 8 minutes. I'm going to take one question from the floor, and I will finish up with a question of mine. Just over there.
My name is Mahmoud Jaff. I have a question for the panel. I think overall there's a sort of positive vibe for the designate Prime Minister of Iraq and the President to cooperate together and hopefully have a better 4 years in the upcoming for Iraq. Here on the panel, the challenges and the opportunities were rightly outlined. What do you think would be difficulties in front of the next government of Iraq to appropriately tackle those challenges that was mentioned here? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One thing which hasn't been mentioned, and I think is cornerstone of stability, is reconciliation. Reconciliation, we have experienced it here in Kurdistan practically and in a wider, was the major factor in stabilizing KRG for very long term. In 91, when the Kurdish parties and the Peshmerga came back to Erbil and Suleimania, and they took the helm of the government and they formed the new government, we had about 25,000 Peshmerga forces that they came back to form the new administration. At the time we had about 250,000 what we basically fighters, that they were on the side of the government fighting the Peshmerga. These people were in many ways that they were engaging the Peshmerga, they had contributed in killing of Peshmerga and so on. But within one day, they decided whatever happened in the past is in the past. And they got back to the society, and now we see them like everybody else. As a matter of fact, they are all forgotten as who's who and so on, only the elder ones that remember. So now they are an integral part of the society. In Iraq, we do have that problem of reconciliation process has not started, although millions and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars been spent, and there has been a dysfunctional entity in the Prime Minister's office in the past 10 years, I would say. How do you see reconciliation, and what contributions can you make to the process of reconciliation? I'll start with you, Hansi.
Thank you. Let me This is a very interesting question, and to be over here, okay, reconciliation. What we're talking, I mean, because to be frank, I came here a year and a half ago. Reconciliation was the word. UN had how many working groups trying to get together. It was mainly linked to the, let's say, to the recuperation of the Sunni camp. A year and a half ago, later, I mean, things have changed, and reconciliation was practically out of the big thing. Most of the Sunni parties, and I'm going to give you an example. Handar came back from Qatar, and he came back over here. He's now free. I mean, so on the higher level, it seems that and Sunnis have been willing to work with the Shia. I have the impression that we're moving slowly. We're on a transition phase from the inter-ethnic politics to more transversal politics. That doesn't mean that we don't need reconciliation. And maybe what we need is to be more active to be active and quick in the reconstruction of the areas that have been destroyed by Daesh. I guess that it's important the Sunni community in, for example, Mosul and the area surroundings feel that the government comes to help them the way they're going to go down to Basra. But I wonder, I mean, it's just a question I put to you because I don't wonder if this concept of reconciliation has not as much weight as it used to have maybe a year and a half ago. My feeling, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, Bruno?
Okay, I'll start with you, and then my first posting, once again, I'm sorry, was Venezuela in the 90s, early 90s. And it was very much debated a law, not in Venezuela, but in Argentina. You might remember the end of dictatorship in after Videla's period. In the 80s, they started a legislation process which ended up in a quite famous, at least in South America, law which was called La Ley del Olvido, the law, the bill of forgetting. What happened before is over. In Italy, at the end of World War II, the last, well, not in the 1996, we had another one, a Minister of Justice from the Communist Party, who happened in 1944, happened to be the head of the Communist Party, Mr. Togliatti. The first decree he signed as Minister of Justice was another kind of Argentinian version of Ley del Olvido for the fascist members, those who didn't commit crimes. So I'll switch to the first. Probably this kind of solution...
You need to be quick.
Yeah, this kind of solution is also for the next government in terms of solving this kind of problem, in terms of, say, economic measures they must take. They have the list. I didn't mention before, but new visa category for investors and simplification of the arrival system. The procedures for register a company, the famous one-stop shop system, which never worked here. So the new government has a list already prepared of imported export procedures. They have it done. They have it written down. Please, do it.
Eric, in 2 minutes.
Yes, quickly on reconciliation, the question that you posed. I think this is an essential question, essential for the future of Iraq, but it's also a very difficult question. Bruno was giving us an overview of his career throughout this forum. Let me just go back to my previous posting. I was ambassador to Tripoli, a country where the problems are not the same, but are similar to those of Iraq. We devoted a lot of attention to national reconciliation, but it's extremely difficult. And why? Because you need a deep knowledge of the cultures, tradition, and history of the country. You need to have a huge presence throughout the country to understand what is going on in communities. And you need to focus on a community level before you can reach to the national level. That's my conviction. And frankly speaking, we as an embassy, we don't have this deep knowledge and huge presence. So what we do, instead of getting involved in this ourselves, is we look for NGOs that do have this long presence and that do have this deep knowledge, and we support their activities, and we think that is the best we can do for the moment. It's a pity our UK colleague is not here anymore, because the UK is one of the most active embassies, I think, in this particular field, and they could share some experience with us, but he's not here.
Yeah, unfortunately left. Well, only remains that I'd like to thank the panel for their absolutely thoughtful ideas, and I'd like to thank MERI for organizing this, and thank you all for attending, and just give them a hand for their contribution. Thank you.